yesterday we worked on applying the quadratic formula to word problems. So we went through these steps of solving word problems, and we got up to the point where we wrote our equation and set it equal to 0. Now that it's set equal to 0, we're ready to solve, and we're solving using the quadratic formula. Just as a reminder, I'm going to write the quadratic formula for you. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So, first thing we're going to do is we are going to identify our a, our b, and our c. So a is the number in front of the first term here. So in front of the x squared, there's an invisible 1. B is the number in front of the second, so that's 20. And C is the last number, which is negative 3,000. So now that we have our A and our B and our C, we're going to plug in those values for A, B, and C. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the quadratic formula one more time. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually erase the letter and replace it with the number so you can see exactly where it's going. So negative b, I'm going to erase the b and write 20 plus or minus b squared, so erase the b, replace b with 20. Then we have minus 4ac. So I'm going to erase the a, I'm going to erase the a, and I'm going to write 1. And I'll erase the c and put negative 3,000. Just extend the line there. And in the denominator, we have 2a. I'll erase the a, and I'll make it a 1. So now let's go through and let's actually start to solve this. The negative 20 is fine. 20 squared. When we square a number, we multiply it times itself. So you can put that into your calculator, 20 squared. 20, and here's our square button. 20 squared gives us 400. So you would rewrite this in your next step, but I'm just going to erase the 20 squared, and I'm going to write it as 400. Actually, I'll just rewrite it underneath. So we have x is equal to negative 20 plus or minus the square root of 400. We got that from 20 squared. And now we're going to multiply negative 4 times 1 times negative 3,000. So I'll put that in my calculator. When I put the negative 4 in my calculator, I'm making sure I use the negative button, not the minus button. So negative 4 times 1 times negative 3,000. Again, don't forget to use the negative button, not the subtraction button. We end up with a positive 12,000. So I'm going to write plus 12,000. I do plus because it's positive. If it was negative, I would write minus. All over 2 times 1, which is 2. So now we can add what we have underneath the square root. So let's do that. Again, we have to rewrite it. X is equal to negative 20 plus or minus the square root of 400 plus 12,000 is 12,400 all over 2. So now that we've combined everything we can, we're actually going to pull this apart. We have 2 equations in one here. We have a plus and a minus, so that gives us 2 separate equations. We have x is equal to negative 20 plus the square root of 12,400 all over 2. And x is equal to negative 20 minus the square root of 12,400 all over 2. So here's where we move to our calculators. We're going to plug the numerator. We'll start with this one on the left first. We'll plug the numerator into the calculator and then divide it by 2. So let's do that. We have negative 20 plus the square root, so the second button and the square root, plus the square root of 12,400. I hit enter. Whoops, I already did 124,000. Let me fix that. Negative 20 plus the square root, so second x squared button gives you square root 12,400. There we go. And now I hit enter. I got my answer. Now I'm going to press divide. It's going to take the previous answer, that 91, and we're going to divide it by 2. We get 45 and the numbers after our decimal. We're going to round to the nearest tenth. So we're going to round to one place after the decimal. So I look 1 to the right. Because it's a 7, it's greater than 5. It's going to bump that 6 up to a 7. So we end up with 45.7 as one of our solutions. Now let's take a look at the second one, where we have subtraction. So same thing, we go to our calculator, and let's type it in. We have negative 20 minus the square root of 12,400. Hit enter, and then divide by 2. We get 65 how do we round this? Well, we want to round to the nearest tenth, so we look at the 6. We go to 1 to the right of the 6. It's a 7. Because that digit is a 5 or higher, it's going to bump that 0.6 up to a 0.7. So we end up with negative 65.7. Now let's take a look at our two answers. We have 45.7 and negative 65.7. Well, if I recall, x is equal to the width, right? So can we have a width that's negative? No, a negative length doesn't make sense. You can't measure something that's negative. So that answer simply doesn't make sense. We can get rid of it. That means our only possible answer is 45.7. Now, the reason why we're going back and making sense of these two answers is because this is a word problem. You have to make sure that your answers make sense. It does not make sense to have a negative width. So we cross that off. So that means our width is 45.7. So I'll write it right here. X equals 45.7, and that is yards. So our width is 45.7 yards. What about our length? Well, to figure out the length, our length is x plus 20. We know our x is 45.7, and we'll add 20 to it. And we end up with 65.7 yards. That is our width. So our supermarket is 45.7 by 65.7. That is our width and our length. So we just use the quadratic formula to solve this equation in order to find the dimensions of the supermarket. It has a width of 45.7 and a length of 65.7. So please make sure you have this written down in your Kami. You can either try it along with the video, or at this point you may be checking your answer. And then make sure you turn it in through Google Classroom. If you have any questions, send me an email. Have a wonderful weekend.